Tomorrow as I record this video, or today as I upload this video, there is supposed to be an update for Tower Defense Simulator, given the fact that last week there wasn't an update and 2 weeks ago there was an update. The developers are now working on a bi-weekly schedule, which means that there should be an update this week. We don't know what's going to be in it, but we can speculate. But I'm going to talk about some speculation for not necessarily this update, but updates in the future. So firstly, there's been some discussions on balancing feedback in the TDS Discord. Now, just to mention that not everything here that I'm about to talk about in balancing feedback is obligated nor subject to make it into the game. And these are just gauging of ideas by the testers, and developers could reject these ideas and the testers may overrule each other. But it does give us some indications of what's happening within the quality assurance testing program. So there is a rebalance of certain towers that are meant to be strong, but don't quite live up to their expectations within the meta. So towers like the Accelerator or Gatling Gun have pretty straightforward designs because, I mean, their gimmicks, I think, allow them so that a slight increase in its statistics make them meta, maybe not the best meta, but meta at least. But the one thing that they've been struggling with is balancing models for the engineer, because the engineer currently is seen as a jack of all trades while also being quite good towards the end. However, it's really towards like the middle bit where the engineer isn't used as often. Well, apart from hardcore mode, because hardcore mode, the engineer can actually see all of the enemies, well, the tower itself. Once the sentries got removed from their lead detection, people, I feel like, started to use the engineer less in hardcore mode. Anyways, 2 ideas have been pitched, and I'd like to see which one is more popular within the community, but this does not mean that we'll balance the engineer around the winning result. So the first idea is keep engineer as a jack of all trades, general buff to stats, but never have its DPS outperform other specialist towers early to late game, which is the thing for generalist towers. If you make a generalist tower good at least 1 point in the game, or the best tower at 1 point in the game, it'll just make it so you have a tower that suits, I don't know, early game, mid game, or the end game, and you have a tower that's also pretty good, or second best, or third best in other stages of the game. But then option B is to rebalance the engineer to form like a ramp-up tower, something like the Swarmer or Necromancer, where early on they're not as powerful, but later on they are extremely powerful. One way that it can accomplish this is to making its scrap meter a bit higher, but then allowing it to build way more sentries, perhaps up to 6 or 7, because I believe currently the limit is 4 at max level. The idea is to rebalance it to allow the engineer to benefit from more towers like the Commander, as the fire rate boost would allow it to constantly sustain all max sentries. Because yes, currently, right now, the engineer isn't technically seen as a tower that can be buffed by support towers. I mean, technically it can be buffed, like the range and the damage and the fire rate buffs all have an effect on the engineer. The problem is the sentries are the main components of the DPS for the engineer, and they can't really be buffed by these towers. I mean, there was a glitch in the past where the range could be buffed by the DJ booth, but we won't speak about that. So with this change, the idea of having the engineer have a larger scrap meter, so currently I believe at level 5 it's relatively low compared to the damage it does, so the scrap meter is 250 while the damage of the engineer is 50, so it only requires 5 shots, and do bear in mind that there's a max units of 4, so only 20 shots and, well, 20 max hit shots. I mean, technically the engineer can be buffed, but then defense and everything like that. In any case, on the surface, let's just say 20 shots and a sentry can ramp up all of its damage and deal damage to bosses, okay? So the idea proposed is that the scrap meter is increased, so instead of 250, maybe like 1,000 for example, but the sentry can build way more sentries, 6 or 7 at max level, and then the engineer can benefit from, say, the Commander and damage buffs, because then it will allow the engineer to replenish these sentries a lot quicker. That way, buffs, damage buffs, fire rate buffs, they actually do now have an effect on the engineer to the point where the sentries can be built quicker. And it would allow to get a maximum DPS than the current engineer, and here it's called much higher. However, it'll take a time to ramp up. So actually, it's like a bit like the Accelerator, except the Accelerator is affected by stuns, whereas the engineer is affected by no damage being dealt by it for a long period of time. And in any case, a lot of the people, over like 90-ish%, want B, I want A, but yeah, fair enough. And like, yeah, sure, the developers or the testers said that they will not balance the engineer based around the winning result purely on that. However, yeah, there's a very stark difference between B and A. So the engineer maybe, given this poll, become a very late game tower where the scrap meter is increased, the limit on the sentries is also increased, which then means that buffs the fire rate buff and the damage buff specifically, now has a greater effect on the engineer proportionally because its sentries, I'll say more hard. Well, it is more harder. It's just harder to construct these sentries, and having damage buffs and fire rate buffs onto the engineer tower can allow these sentries to be built quicker. Next, there's a poll on the cowboy, which states that, well, it's some issues with the cowboy that people have stated, or what's been polled. So here, first one, it's survivability / defense potential, it's income, both and neither. The cowboy feels relatively balanced. Most people say the survivability and defense potential and its income feels very weak in both regards within the current meta, which I'm not entirely sure. Personally, I would find it very difficult to balance a tower that A, generates income, but B, also deals a decent amount of DPS. It can't be the best DPS tower because of its income. However, I think the cowboy could be better. I think. Maybe buff the cowboy to the level of the golden cowboy, and the golden cowboy can be buffed slightly better so that its income is increased. But then it's also, its DPS also, actually, can't buff the income and buff the DPS. I mean, you can, but one or the other has to greatly be buffed compared to the other. In regards to the Golden Cowboy, I think that the income should be greatly buffed, or the DPS should be minimally buffed. However, that being said, because it is an income-based tower, it does throw the meta off quite a bit. But do note that this poll only regards the cowboy. I mean, technically, it's both the Golden Cowboy and the Cowboy, normal Cowboy. 65% say both of its income and DPS feels a bit weak. Don't know if anything's going to happen to it. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, in this update specifically, I'd assume, based on this poll here, there might be a Swarmer buff. Or, no, sorry, not even a Swarmer buff. A Swarmer nerf. Yes, it's likely that the Swarmer will receive a nerf. However, not confirmed. And like based on previous polls, it seems like the Accelerator seems to be the tower that people want to be changed the most, before going to the Engineer, which I find really odd, but then the Accelerator is majorly ahead of like all the other towers. Nothing mentioned about the Golden Scout yet, though, which was polled all the way back in the 24th of March. Nothing's changed about the Golden Scout, and actually it's remained unchanged since 2024 Fallen Mode update. And again though, there was a poll about the Hidden Wave, and I don't really expect the Hidden Wave to change all too much. Similar to the Hexweaver / Fallen Jester poll, which states should have less enemies that stun / debuff your towers. Next, will the skills update appear in the next update? I don't know. I don't think it will, given the fact that only the tree has been leaked. I feel like for something like this, there might be some like tower leaks of it having like the skills update or like actual feature gameplay, and it's like the day before, so don't think it's going to happen. However, could be wrong, may just be a minor update about the skills, who knows. Next, something that people just want me to talk about. I normally don't cover community stuff or Discord stuff that's related to only the community, but there's a new rule / guideline recently added to content creator role. Please do not use any form of AI within your media. To simplify any form of usage of AI in your content without the purpose of putting your own genuine effort will are prohibited, and an immediate result in the removal of rank / role on site if found. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to announce I don't use AI. I really don't like AI, and I am a student of biology. I don't ever use AI even in like my scientific work. Like maybe sometimes if I have an error in my coding for statistics or whatever, maybe I'll use AI to say, listen man, what's going on here? However, I just don't like the concept of AI in general, so I stay well clear of it. Well, unless I'm discussing it in a video. As a topic, as a specific topic, I think that will be allowed. Then again, I was just given the content creator. I didn't ask for the content creator role. I was just given it by a administrator, I believe. They just said, oh, we noticed that you don't have the content creator role. Do you want it? I'm like, sure, I guess. Finally, will the Ducky Revenge event end today, basically? And the answer, not likely. So the reason why I say not likely is because the contract for the Ducky Went Down to Georgia ends in 15 days as I record this video. So but when this video comes out, it'll be 14 days, aka 2 weeks. So it means that it is likely that the event will end in 2 weeks, which is 2 weeks off from when the Ducky Revenge Battle Pass ends. But we've known in the past that the Battle Pass and the events don't really line up their dates. So fret not, anyone still grinding out for the Nerd Ducky. Yes, I think I genuinely took about 30 attempts to get the Nerd Ducky logbook. This motherfucker genuinely took forever to get. However, it does look like you will be able to get this at least for another 2 weeks.